In terms of expectations and making sure that everyone's on the same page, communication and making sure you communicate clearly enough so expectations are met, it's an interesting journey to get to that point. It really requires you to be able to communicate in a very calm manner and conscious manner too.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Powerful Man Show. I am your host, Doug Holt, with my co-host, Tim, the Powerful Man, Matthews. Tim, how's it going, brother?
Fantastic. Do you know what? We should have a soundbite in there that when you introduce me, there's like loads of fans that go, yeah!
Yeah, one of those artificial ones, because that's what it has to be.
Yeah, that's what just came in my mind as you were saying, Tim, how are you, brother? The Powerful Man, Matthews. I'm like, wow, it sounds so cool.
I love it, man. I love it. Yeah,
cheers
we
going
definitely
on.
should. We could get the guys from the Brotherhood to come in and cheer you on during these sessions, because it would be very fitting. Very fitting. I don't want to give you too many compliments, though. We are guys, after all.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
So, Tim, before we hit record, you told me a really interesting story about a conversation you had recently. Why don't you kick this one off for us?
It would be my pleasure and honor, Doug. So, I have just come off a conversation with one of the wives of one of the men in the Brotherhood. And she sent us a message, when was it? So, a couple of days ago, she sent a message in saying that she was quite disappointed and frustrated that her husband has arrived back from the Alpha Reset and he hasn't changed, is what she was believing in and seeing and thinking. And she was very frustrated because she thought that the Alpha Reset and the activation method was going to be this really transformational experience. And let me I say transformational. She said she was very pleased with the results that he got in the first stages, and she really pinned a lot of her hopes on the 3 days in the Alpha Reset being the catalyst for change, and that he was going to arrive back and be this new man. However, he arrived back and then was repeating some of the old patterns. And then she was frustrated to hear that he then joined the Brotherhood because naturally, quite rightly, as she should be, if she's seen the same behaviors, then why the hell would you then continue? It just doesn't make sense. So anyway, I obviously jumped on the phone with this lovely, lovely woman because I wanted to understand more about what was going on. You and I often talk, Doug, don't we? Well, the whole coaching team often talk about, and even we say this to the guys, if I was to go to your wife and ask her what her version of the story is, what would she say? Because sometimes the guys like to think that they can, share all this one version of the story. And I kind of get the impression that sometimes they either want or expect or hope that we are just going to really back them up. But obviously, we're not just going to do that. We're not going to sell the wife down the river. No. So this is where this gets really interesting. So I reached out to this, again, amazing, amazing woman, and I got on the phone with her, and I wanted to know what this particular guy was doing. Turns out when he got back from the Alpha Reset, he was going on his phone until late. And one of the biggest breakthroughs for him and his relationship with his wife in the early stages of the activation method was that at about 6 p.m., 7 p.m., when he arrived home from work, they both put their phone in a drawer and it was away. Awesome. They got to connect. Yet, for whatever reason, that's fallen by the wayside. So she shared that with me. And then she shared that he was still speaking to her and the kids, being quite short-tempered. And that was one of the main things that came up for us at the Alpha Reset. The conversation got cut short, so I was able to jump back on the phone with her again today, actually. And again, we just had an amazing conversation. I shared with her everything that came up for her husband, and obviously he was happy for me to share this, with what came up for her husband at the Alpha Reset. And what came out of it is that he's just such a loving guy. Now, this guy runs a scaffolding business. So to put it into context, one of the guys, I think it was one of the guys from the Brotherhood who was volunteering, who works in construction, he was saying, you do not pick a fight with a scaffolder. You do not fight with a scaffolder. They are notoriously hard. So, it gives a little bit of context to, the kind of persona that this particular guy has been, has brought with him. So for me to then share with his wife that he broke down in tears at the Alpha Reset, sharing how he's just such a loving guy and he's so positive, but he's just lost it over the past 10 or 15 years and he's become quite negative and angry. And for him to really see and realize and accept all this, because Doug, at points, he just didn't want to be in the room at all. And that's fine. But when someone's really uncomfortable, he was fidgeting, he was looking around, scratching his head, shuffling in his seat. When the guys were going through the exercises, he just wanted to be out of there. But credit to him, he stayed in the room, stayed focused, stuck with it. And right at the end of the day 2, that's when he finally had his release. Then day 3, his vision was all around the lifestyle with his wife and kids. Saying, I just want to go on holiday and have the option that if I want to stay another week, I can, which is awesome. So then to get this email from his beautiful wife, I was quite shocked. I'm like, wow, this guy has just planned out on day 3 how he's going to structure his business to have more time with you and the kids. Where's the disconnect here? And it turns out both of those guys, when he came out of the Alpha Reset, they just weren't communicating in a way that was conducive to these guys managing the expectations. And, she said, I feel a bit unfair now because I feel like my expectations on him were too high. Because I shared that, look, change takes time. And, these first 10 weeks of the activation method and Alpha Reset have really got him moving. It always gets the guys going. It gets them unchained. And it's a great process, and it's the beginning, because after that they can really then start to build, because now they see and realize actually who they are. And for this guy in particular, he realized he'd been holding on to anger, released it, and accepted, what he wanted. And again, the conversation with his wife today ended with her just being over the moon. She was like, wow, he really, that's what he wants for us. And I shared with her his commitments for the next 90 days, which again are all around her and the kids. And also, he was messaging me last night and I said, look, because he reached out saying that, again, he's basically mirroring what his wife said in the email. And I said, look, she has every right to be annoyed with you. She has every right to not trust you. For the past 2 years, you've not been a nice guy. So she has every right. The expectations haven't been identified. And as a result, they've not been met. They've been mismanaged. So, the reason why I bring this up for you, because I know you navigate this so well in your marriage and you guys have done a ton of work on this. And the reason why I bring it up to benefit the listeners as well is because, for this particular couple who were clearly so in love, she was in tears by the end of the phone call, tears of joy and relief and happiness. They're so in love. And that one thing of, unmet expectations or mismanaged expectations and the piece of communication is a one thing if they're really committed to, would, and obviously we saw it today in my conversation with her, change everything.
Oh, absolutely. And I know who you're talking about and such great people, right? In coaching these men throughout the years, Tim, what we've learned in couples in general, working with them and seeing their success, the 2 things that cause the most stress, right, in a relationship are unmet expectations and thwarted communication or bad communication, right? That's when things really go awry. Now, of course, you got money and all these things that people talk about, but those are the 2 big ones. And when we have something that we expect, right? We expect, in this case, she's expecting this big change, which this guy had, by the way. He had a complete 180. However, too little, too late, right? He's still got some old patterns he's working through. This is, as we always say, it's not a quick fix. Anybody that sells a quick fix, immediately turn around and run the other way, right? So it's the unmet expectation that comes through. If he's been a jerk, and guys listening to this, if you've been a jerk in your relationship for 2, 4, 6, 10 years, you can't expect your partner to all of a sudden, take your change that you've made. You've made a drastic change. You've lost weight. You're nicer all of a sudden. You're taking her out, what have you. The proof is in the pudding, right? You need to make that time up. If you've been a jerk for 2 years, you get to be a nice guy for 3 years, right? You get to make up for lost time to prove who you really are. And it's the feminine spirit, that comes in and really is going to test the masculine energy to make sure that it's really true, right? Can I really trust this new you? And when we talk about expectations, what happens most of the time, and it sounds like it happened in this case, Tim, is the expectation itself hasn't been communicated, right? It hasn't. I expect you to do X, Y, Z. That's not been communicated. So here she has this hidden expectation of what's going to happen that she probably didn't communicate to her husband. Her husband has this expectation. Hey, I've changed my ways mostly. So, see me how I am now, but he hasn't communicated that either. And now you have two people with expectations of a situation. And when you have an expectation, let's remember, we've talked about this in previous podcasts. And for those listening, I encourage you to go back and re-listen to the ones we've talked about with expectation because they're so powerful. But when you have an expectation, that's a yes or no situation, black or white. It's one way or the other, right? There's no and, it's an or situation. Did he change or is he the same, right? There's no possibility in an expectation, which is also an issue that's there. So she doesn't communicate the expectation. He doesn't communicate his expectation. So now you have two individuals who are in love with hidden expectations, black and white, of the way things should be and the other person should act, yet no one's communicated, no one's talked about it. So you're setting yourself up for almost guaranteed disappointment, right? And the whole other alternative is, what about the possibility, right? The option, the and situation. What if he does change and she looks for those little changes? Because I also know from talking to you about this offline that she noticed a ton of changes this man went through, right? These little things. And right away she was like, wow, I'm on board. If I'm not mistaken, hopefully I can speak freely, or I'll just talk about other couples in general. Oftentimes one couple's got 1, maybe even 2 feet out the door. And when they start to see and focus on the changes, the possibility, that brings the marriage and relationship back together. But when you're looking for all of a sudden this radical change and you're looking for the wrong, you're going to find the wrong. You're going to hit that telephone pole, so to speak. And especially when expectations aren't communicated, you're setting your partner up for complete failure, Tim, and it just never works out. Hey guys, I want to interrupt this episode because I want to talk to you about something important. We put together a case study on how almost 300 men have taken control of their lives. They're 4Xing their business revenues and they're having more connected and intimate sex, all without sacrificing their relationships or their health by using the activation method. Now, a lot of you have contacted us and they want to know how they're doing it. We put together this short 11-minute case study just for you, so you can see how these entrepreneurs are achieving this level of success. To get this case study, all you have to do is go over to thepowerfulman.com/11. Yep, that's 11. And you can get the case study right now. All right, it's only 11 minutes and it's going to show you exactly how these men have done it. All right, let's get back to the episode.
Yeah, and I think that's what happened in this instance, because she actually said at the end of the course, I feel bad now. I feel like I had unfair expectations on him. And I said, well, it just is what it is. Don't you start beating yourself up now. It's a great lesson. And when he comes through the door tonight, maybe you want to share that with him. Maybe you want to, apologize. And who knows, maybe that'll open up a conversation. He'll apologize too. And, I think the big thing that came out of our conversation, mine and hers, is the expectations piece. I said to her, I shared with her that, look, this is going to take time. There's going to be bumps in the road. As long as we all are going to the same place, which we are, you said what you want is the lifestyle. So you're able to have the freedom with your husband and with your kids. And he wants that too. So we're on the same page. You both want the same thing. Us as a coaching staff and a coaching team and the other men in the brotherhood are all clear on that and are going to help you there too. So as long as we're all committed to going to the same place, there are going to be bumps in the road. There just are. And, as long as you both have the right support around you and you're committed to going to the same place and you love one another, then we can navigate those bumps very differently. I think for her, that because she was just so hungry to be in the relationship with her husband and have him be the man that she knows he's capable of being, it's almost like that hunger turned into a last-ditch attempt that these 3 days were going to completely change and save their marriage. But we all know it never happens that way, does it? It's what happens after those 3 days. Like you said, if you've been a jerk for 2 years, you get to be a nice guy for 3. And in communicating that with her, I think you could just, she even said, she was so relieved. I feel better now. In her mind, she'd thought things, should be a certain way. And now we've changed the expectations and opened up new possibilities. And the great thing about this is, this is what I love about what happens here, Doug, is she is going to send us an email at the end of every week with a summary on their relationship. So what's great about that is, as we are then in communication with her, and I've told the husband as well that I've been in communication with his wife. He already knows, of course, but I've told him the conclusion of that conversation. That's the great thing about this, is it's not like he can then go off and, be a certain guy and be a certain husband or father, but then show up to the calls with us and tell us a different story, because everyone's going to be in the picture here, which, it's important if we want to make sure that these two very clearly in love individuals are able to thrive together. Sometimes it's great, isn't it? Because sometimes the wives say, I'm going to tell Arthur, I'm going to tell Tim, I'm going to tell Mel, I'm going to tell Doug. They kind of threaten the husband with the coaches, which is great because, in terms of expectations and making sure that everyone's on the same page so everyone can be happy together, it's so key to then have that container in which you're going to be held to that higher standard too. Because at the end of the day, communication and making sure you communicate clearly enough so expectations are met, it's an interesting journey to get to that point. It really requires you to be able to communicate in a very calm manner and be able to communicate in a very conscious manner too. Not attacking the other person, not trying to prove you're right and they're wrong. Just being grounded, being calm, taking ownership, understanding the feminine energy as well. Like you were saying, they're going to test you. It's going to be tested. It's going to test the masculine to make sure, it can stand firm and stand strong. And it takes time. You always say about going to the gym and getting your reps in. It's the same thing here. There are going to be times when you do not communicate in the way that you would like to or that is conducive. But as long as you then are aware of that and adjust, you'll get there.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. So, Tim, if we're to summarize the topic here of navigating unmet expectations, when I think about the takeaways here for the men and women listening to this, the biggest thing here is twofold. One is realizing when you have expectations versus possibilities, right? And again, the difference is an expectation is black and white. I expect him to show up to our meetings on time. If Tim doesn't show up to our meetings, I get upset. If he does, everything's fine. Whereas the possibility, like, yeah, Tim's, we have a meeting, Tim's going to show up, it's all good. Then if Tim doesn't show up late, I'm like, oh, maybe he got caught up in traffic. He was talking to his girl. He's working with the guys. We're still good. And then we get to have a communication about it, right? This is our relationship, which is kind of like a marriage of sorts. And so there's no anger there. There's no unmet expectation because it's a possibility. So step one is recognizing when you have an expectation and decide right then, of course, if you want to change that. But the second part of that is the communication of that expectation, right? So if I say, Tim, I expect you to be on time because it's really important to me, and I expect you to show up right on time, you then have the power to say, cool, Doug, I'm going to do that. Or, nah, I got things going on, so that's too much pressure, or what have you. Now we can have a dialogue and a communication, and that's how you get past, these upsets. And these upsets in relationships, especially romantic relationships, they carry over, right? Because they break out into a fight. My expectation isn't met. Now I'm angry because you've disrespected me in some way, even though it wasn't communicated. And now you have this couple that's going to be mad at each other for days, if not weeks. And in between, you're going to have other expectations that aren't met. They're going to get stacked upon each other. And that's how we get into these situations.
Completely. So well said. So well said. And again, it's a journey, isn't it? We're still we'll always be on the journey. Always be on the journey. As you were sharing that, Doug, I was thinking about times that this has happened with Amelia and I. I'm very grateful for the awareness that I have and the amazing support that I have in you and other people around me. But yeah, I think for me, the biggest, how do I put this? I'm going to say wound. So the biggest wound for me in being able to navigate unmet expectations is, so when I react, it's because I feel like I am judged or I don't feel good enough. That's what it always comes down to for me. It's always like I'm not being heard, or my opinion doesn't matter, or there's many different forms or symptoms that can come up, but it always comes back to that one core wound, if you will, of not feeling good enough. That then makes me want to, if I'm not aware of, then means that my communication from that point then becomes very reactionary. And that definitely does not help in navigating unmet expectations. Like you just said, that then fuels an argument and a fight because both people are fighting to be seen and heard. That's all it is, really. So yeah, you said it so well.
Well, on that note, that's a wrap for us today, guys. So we will see you again for the next episode. And guys, when you get a chance here, it helps us out a lot. We really appreciate you sharing this with other men as you build your tribe. But if you could also leave a comment and review wherever you're finding this episode, we greatly appreciate that. That allows other men like you to join in the conversation with us. Until next episode, for Tim and I, we will see you next time.
See you guys.